Today is the start of the Ross Ulbricht trial. This is, you may also know it as the Silk Road trial. He's accused of being the owner and operator of the Silk Road. The first one, which was an online marketplace for illegal things, such as illegal drugs. This is not just about Ross Ulbricht. This is not just about, whether a man will be sentenced to 30 years or even life in prison. It's about internet freedom as well. For example, the FBI found the server for Silk Road, and they still haven't revealed really how they did that. They have made some claims about how they did that, and IT experts have just basically rejected them as complete rubbish and ridiculous. And so we still don't know how they've garnered that evidence, how they penetrated the Tor secure online service to get that information. We need to know, we all need to know, because we need to protect our privacy in this time where the NSA is snooping on everything we do. It also opens the door for web hosts or people who run sites like Craigslist or even Wikipedia, I suppose, to be held responsible for the actions of their customers. Because in the end, the Dread Pirate Roberts, if that is indeed Ross Ulbricht, hasn't been proven innocent unless proven guilty. If he is indeed that person, then still he wasn't the one buying and selling drugs. He was just the one providing the website for people to do that. And also, in this case, the government, the prosecutor, equates a desire for privacy, which is essentially the use of encryption, with criminal intent, which is a dangerous, dangerous precedent. Wanting to be private, to have privacy, doesn't mean I'm trying to commit a crime. This is not the Soviet Union. I mean, in the Soviet Union, if you wanted to have some privacy, well, maybe you were going to do something that the state wouldn't like. Not, setting aside the fact that, the state outlawed all kinds of things that are harmless and victimless and just parts of our inherent human liberty, just as the state is doing today in the United States. Now, there are the murder for hire charges. What? Murder for hire charges? No, there aren't. There are no murder for hire charges in this trial. Now, a couple of news articles came out today, I think from Reuters and maybe Sky News. I'm not sure. But basically the headline was, murder for hire charges at heart of this Ross Ulbricht trial. And that's, that's so upsetting because that is not true. Ross Ulbricht is not charged with any murder for hire schemes. At least not in New York City, at least not in this trial. As far as I'm concerned, the murder for hire charges are pure slander because they want this guy so desperately that they're willing to slander him and make stuff up. It's not like they haven't invented plots before, the FBI. Some of these terror plots that they've supposedly taken down recently were, more, there were more FBI agents involved than real perpetrators, or it just stank. So there are all of the charges in New York City are victimless charges. Money laundering, drug stuff, They can't cite any victims for these charges. They're victimless. And yet they want to put him into prison, possibly for life, which I think is just a travesty. It's especially a travesty because he or whoever ran this site, whether it was Ross Ulbricht or someone else, explicitly ran it as an experiment in libertarianism. So this was not a person who was out for money. This was not a person who was just trying to get to the king, the top of the hill to be a Pablo Escobar or some crazy stuff like that. This was an experiment in freedom, in liberty. I'm not a big fan of drugs, but there are people who are, lots of people, and they should have that freedom to consume them if that's what they want to do, as long as they're not hurting anyone. And to top it all off, Ulbricht's defense is not permitted to talk about the fact that this is an explicit libertarian experiment, which just, adds a little bit of crappy icing to the, cake. So, do drugs. So when I was chatting about this on Reddit recently, people said, well, drugs do a lot of harm in society. And I don't necessarily agree with that. But the act of selling drugs or helping other people sell drugs or buying drugs or producing drugs is victimless, unless you're killing somebody to do it, or otherwise committing fraud or using a first use of force. It's victimless. Nobody is hurt by that. It's a consensual interaction. Should there be efforts to get people to not take drugs, to get people to not be addicted to drugs, to not risk their lives with drugs? Do I want my son using drugs? Absolutely not. I don't want him to. Should there be all these efforts? Absolutely. Should the government be doing it? Absolutely not. What does the government do to help people? It puts them in cages for a long, long time, and it forces them into these situations where people often have to use violence to settle disputes because they don't have recourse to the law, to the courts. So, really it's the government that is making the drug epidemic worse, I think, than it has to be. I think the drug epidemic, drug addiction, is a medical issue. It should be handled by civil society. By drug addiction clinics, by outreach groups, by doctors, by nurses, by therapists, by psychologists, psychiatrists, because really you're not going to fix it by just throwing somebody into a cage, and maybe you even know somebody who got thrown into a cage and they came out of it and they're like, I'm cured, I'm never going back, And, likewise, if you find a shoplifter and you cut off their hand, as they do in, some Muslim countries, that guy may say, I'm never stealing again, And so you may be able to point to that and say, hey, it works. Well, it really works. You just cut off his hand and he stops being a thief, But that's barbaric. And so is putting people into a cage just for, engaging in consensual voluntary transactions related to substances that the government doesn't want you to have or that it thinks is harmful. There is an effort to support him. It's been kind of, like by the skin of the teeth kind of a thing. There's some good people there in front of the courthouse right now, today. Since this morning, there are two groups. One group are protesters, and the other group that I've been working to support from behind the scenes are jury nullification activists, people who just want to inform jurors of their right and their power to judge the law as well as the facts. So you may find as a juror that someone did indeed violate the law. The proof is there's no doubt in your mind. But you can take issue with the law. You can say, well, this shouldn't be a law. A law is unjust. As Martin Luther King said, we have a duty to obey just laws. But conversely, we have that same duty to disobey unjust laws. Just as people disobeyed the fugitive slave laws in the 1850s, to take one example. So the jury, it's important to be informed about this because this does affect our future digital freedom. It's important to be informed about what the government is doing to hurt people who haven't hurt anyone, and it's important to get informed about jury rights because this is after the voting box, and before the ammunition box, there's the jury box. And this is an important part of being a citizen of a republic, such as the United States. And one piece of bad news to report from the live blog at thelibertybeat.com of the trial is that a jury has been selected, and these people are not peers of Ross Ulbricht, according to some folks on the scene there. These people are mostly government employees or relatives of government employees. And so this brings up an interesting point for me as to how the prosecutors You know, the government employment, the hand of government has gotten so great in our society, and the people who work for government have such stable work lives and whatnot that they are getting into jury pools, because they don't, once you get a government job, it's super stable, you're not going to be moving around a lot. It's going to be hard to fire you. You're probably going to have enough money to buy a house. May not be a great house, but it's a stable living. And so these people are stable in their communities, and they can get time off easily. The price still get paid, their same rate, because they're government employees. Whereas somebody who works independently, freelance, has a job where they actually play an important role, for them to take weeks off, perhaps 6 weeks off for trial, is impossible. And so what do we have? We don't have a jury of peers anymore. We don't have anything like a fair trial. We have a rubber stamp, just a plain rubber stamp of people who already work for the government, who already buy into the government story, people who already consider it their job to do what the government tells them. And so I think that this is bad news for Ross Ulbricht. This is bad news for us. And in the short term, I'm not sure what we can do. But in the long term, we have to work on this jury issue. We have to make sure that good people are getting on the jury, not just more government yes men. So that's my piece for today. Sorry it's so long. Hope you enjoyed it.